So that's kind of what we're doing. Oh, thank you so very much. And share with each other. And the recording is important so that I can go back and look and see what I said and what we all talked about. I'm very excited about this space that we're in. We do exist primarily to support Black farmers in this space. And I'm learning that the support for Black farmers is not necessarily limited to this particular space, but we're working the whole thing out. So what we're doing today is we're providing some updates about some things that we're working on. Excited to share with our two guests, and then just to share what we're doing in our local area. So anyone who's here from outside of the space, I welcome you to be in the universe, and we're glad to be here. So I think we're gonna start to, I'm looking at we got general news coming up from Joy Brown. So Joy, are you good to start with the general news?
Yes, okay, you all. Good afternoon, happy Sunday. As Karen said, we're all in this space together because we're all working on some type of agriculture piece in our everyday life. Right now, we're excited here in Augusta to be discussing the South Augusta Market that will start on April the 20th on the third Wednesday at Henry Brigham. So we're very excited about that because it will launch on the 20th of April. Next month, we're having our field day as far as we're looking to assist one another. We know it's a busy time, it's the springtime, and where everybody's preparing their area, but we would like to have a field day where we can assist one another instead of meeting and handling our formal business. We'd like to be out in the gardens or farm area with you all. More information will come in a moment with that. I'm going to turn it over to Menia, who will talk about the South Augusta Market, and then followed by Menia, we'll have Ms. Parks of Boggs Academy, and then we'll follow by Mr. Washington of the Southern SARE. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that, Joy. And I would ask that everyone please mute their lines for us. We know that lots of things happen in the background and we don't want to interrupt our speakers. So please make sure you're muted. And make sure that if you joined us after the announcement about putting your business information in the chat, we want to be able to reach you later on. And with that, my name is Menia Chester, and I'm going to give you an update on the South Augusta Farmers Market. We are so excited about this. It's going to be at the Henry Brigham Community Center, and I'm going to be taking applications for farmer vendors who want to participate. So just very excited about that. If you would please give us your contact information. We'll send out the applications when they're ready, or the links to the applications when they're ready. And we want to make sure that we are servicing an area of town that's not being serviced at this point with a farmer's market with good quality food. We know that we know what a food desert is. A food desert is a place where there is a lack of access to a large box grocery store in a 1 mile radius in an urban area and a 10-mile radius in a rural area. And we have a melange of that in South Augusta. So this market is to help kind of ease some of that. And it's going to be once a month. The start date is going to be April 20th. And I think it's going to start at 6 o'clock. Is that correct, Karen?
No,
it's 4 o'clock, sorry. 4 o'clock and it'll end at 6:30. No?
No, it ends at 7.
It ends at 7, okay, 4 to 7. Woo, I messed that up. I was thinking
And put-
about another event. Sorry. So
Mhm.
that would be 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. We're going to put that in the chat. So the South Augusta Farmers Market will be once a month for now, starting April 20th. And it is the third Wednesday.
It's
Which
the
one?
third
Correct.
Wednesday.
The third
Menia,
Wednesday of every month. Okay.
Until
Menia,
October 6th.
Menia, would you please share some of your background as you are our consultant for that market, please?
Yes, I will share my background. I have a background in cooperative extension. So I have ag, family and consumer sciences, which is home economics, and 4-H. So I have done it all, worked with urban and rural groups, and I was the cooperative extension director in Fulton County, which is Atlanta, Georgia, for those of you that aren't from Georgia on this call. But yeah, so I'm excited to share that. And my area of expertise is food deserts. So, and food insecurity and helping people get access to these things. So I am consulting with them on that, but I also do a lot of different things, helping farmers learn how to make their business a business, and just trying to provide resources for marginalized farmers. But anyway, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them for you. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me at southernjazzandsweets.com. And I put that in the chat already, but I'll put it in the chat again. Thank you so much. And I'm excited about the market and I hope to see some of you there as vendors. And I'll turn it over to Alsie.
Thanks, Ms. Menia. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Karen, for inviting me to come speak today. I will be honest with you all. I wasn't sure exactly what the expectation was on my end, so I'm going to freestyle a little bit before I present. I want to just uplift. Brennan Washington is also here to present, and when I entered agriculture, or at least this field of work, he was a mentor to many people like me. And so I'm not sure exactly what Mr. Brennan knows about today and presenting. I'm really excited to get to know everyone and what you're doing and figure out the best ways to share from my perspective and support. But I didn't know what the run of the show was today. So I'm wondering if Mr. Brennan Washington would like to go first, and I'm happy to go now, but I would like to pass my time to him just so that I can get grounded in the group and in the space, if that's okay.
For me, thank you so much. For me, it's cool. I'm sorry. Really wanted for you, Alsie, to talk about what you're doing, what you have been doing previously, and the work that you're doing at Boggs, because in our last farmer meeting in person, we talked a little bit about the work that, well, the potential that exists at Boggs for Black farmers in this particular area. So if you can, and I know when we talked a couple of days ago, you're like, I'm not really sure about what I can say about Boggs, but if you would be willing to share your experience with SAAFON and just to kind of let the folks who are in this space know who you are and where you come from, because I know Brennan is like a legend, and I got that, So, but I want the folks who are here who don't know yet who Brennan is, I want us to figure out how we can work together, like, because Brennan is starting to do some work with supply chain, and I think that we can figure out how to work that out with whether it's Boggs or whether it's elsewhere. But please share with us just who you are and your magical, your superpower, please.
Okay, Ms. Gordon, I can do that. And I appreciate you helping me ground a little bit more. I also it was very helpful just to ground in the purpose of this group. Anyway, so I'm Alsie Parks. I grew up in Decatur, but my people are from Lincolnton, Georgia. I spent all my summers in Augusta with my grandparents. My grandmother, whose name is also Alsie Parks, was a school counselor at Laney Walker. And so I have a deep love and appreciation and connection to my ancestral land, which a lot of, I mean, hopefully I was listening to you all's last meetup on YouTube. So I appreciate you, Miss Karen, for sharing that with me. And I heard that Farmer T was here and just talking about Lincolnton. So I know most of you all are familiar with Lincolnton. And so, yeah, I am, let's see, I wear a lot of hats. I'm a daughter and a educator, a farmer organizer, an agrarian cultural worker, a Southerner, a sister. Yeah, I guess I really am most grounded in you asked what my superpower is. I think my superpower is something that I inherited from my mom and from my grandmother, which is to use my experiences and my skills to support and care for others. My grandmother was very, very active at Tabernacle Baptist Church. And so in the summers that I spent in Augusta, I was always at the church, whether it be on a Wednesday, a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday, just like being present with my grandmother. She was the treasurer. She played all different kinds of roles. And so just really seeing her and how she nurtured community and how she showed up for people was deeply impactful on me. Spending my summers in her kitchen. My grandma had, of course, stove, the washing machine and dryer was in the kitchen, her typewriter was in the kitchen, her sewing machine was in the kitchen. And so just being able to be near her, close to her, taught me a lot. And so you mentioned Boggs Academy. So my mother graduated from Boggs Academy in 1968. And so that's my relationship with Boggs Academy, which is in Keysville, Georgia. Boggs was founded in, I believe, 1904 or 1908, was a institution for teaching Black children, college preparatory, boarding school that sits on 1,250 acres. I joined Boggs Rural Life Center's board in 2000, at the end of 2019, after my mom had gone to a alumni event and had brought me back this pamphlet, which was like, this is our dream, this is our mission, this is what we're trying to do here on the land. And based off of my background, which I'll share a little bit more with you, I wanted to figure out the ways that I could support and help preserve Boggs's legacy. Up until about 1984, it was a school that had not only the natural resources, but the physical infrastructure to sustain the lives of Black school children, the teachers, the administrators, who, were really able to take advantage of a land-based existence. And so I felt really inspired by Boggs's legacy. I feel like I was also inherited a lot of the values that my mom received from the school, and also just like her love for the institution was something that I inherited. And so in 2012, which is when I met Mr. Washington, I was really interested that summer. I was like, I want to learn how to grow food. I want to ride bikes with Black folks, and I want to build my skills as an organizer. And so I found Habesha Works, which is helping Africa by establishing schools at home and abroad. It's an institution that actually just turned 20 years old this year. And so I had been a sociology major at Georgia State, and just learning about how people interact with systems and how those systems impact us, and realized that I found that something that was common amongst all of us was food, and that all of us have different relationships to food. And so through Habesha Works, I really, one, just developed a skill to be able to grow food, but also spiritually ground and connect in the land and all of the beautiful things that the land provides us. And that experience really opened my eyes, one, to how many ways that we can look at food as a tool for liberation and connecting our communities. And so for about the next, I would say 5 or 6 years, I worked alongside there were 2 growing programs at the time that I went through Habesha. There was also Truly Living Well. They both had urban sustainable ag growing and training programs, intensives. And so they were graduating a bunch of young, not necessarily young, but just like Black folks who had this love for the land, who were developing their understanding of food systems, were developing their understanding of how oppressive systems interacted with our ability to live and love and thrive on the land. And so after about 5 or 6 years working with the growers in Atlanta, I would say there were several formations that I was able to be a part of and contribute to, where growers and farmers were coming together and figuring out how to resource ourselves, put gas in the tank, increase our production. I mean, there's just so many needs. And so I think all of the formations, I think what was common amongst all of them was that, as like-minded Black folks who saw food as a vessel to become more self-sufficient, become more self-determining. Food is in our stories and our memories. That I've been a part of a lot of collectives of growers. And so those formations could be collectives, informal collectives, cooperatives. Southwest Atlanta Growers Swag Co-op was one of my first kind of experiences of what it took to build and contribute to and be a foundational member of a cooperative. I'm also really deeply influenced by the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And so that's just a little bit of my background. And then in about, don't get me mixed up with the dates, but after spending those years contributing to Atlanta's local food movement, I decided that I had a big gap in my understanding and my skills around acres, equipment, production, yield. I love Habesha and how much it influenced me, but I also I felt like a whiz with, being able to create and develop and sustain a community garden, and I also got foundational skills in how to develop a agricultural business. But I felt like there was this deeper legacy of Black farming in the South that I really wanted to tap into. And I really wanted to be able to be in intergenerational spaces with elder farmers who come from that experience. And so at that time, I found SAAFON, which I currently work for. SAAFON is the Southeastern African American Farmers Organic Network. It was started by Cynthia Hayes. In 2005, 2006, my Cynthia is now an ancestor. She passed in 2017, right before I actually entered being resourced to work on behalf of farmers. And so at the same time as, you know, leaning into the work of SAAFON and discovering how not just brilliant my Cynthia was, but how brilliantly she held and cultivated relationships amongst farmers across the South, and how seriously she took using sustainable agricultural practices and being in right relationship and in harmony with the natural resources on the land. At the same time where I was trying to fill this gap around acres and rural and elders. And I also recognized that very similarly to what was happening in Atlanta with all these growing programs and all these Black folks who were building up their skills to be good land stewards, that it was happening across the nation in all of our cities, that, you know, it was just this emergent kind of like spiritual imperative or ancestral mandate to grow food and grow in deeper connection with each other, and to really see ourselves as a vital resource for our thriving communities. And so at the same time that I took on work with SAAFON, I also started working for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance as a Southern regional organizer. I did that work for about a year and a half before being a part of the leadership team for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. SAAFON is a part of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. So now that's my primary interface. But between those two organizations and over the past 5 years, being able to not only work here in our beloved Georgia, but with farmers in South Carolina, North Carolina, primarily Alabama, but primarily in Mississippi was where I organized for the past, well, prior to COVID. I was organizing primarily with farmers in Mississippi, and you know, all my loved ones still live in Georgia, so it was time for me to move back home. So I probably have gone over 10 minutes. So I'm gonna stop. And Ms. Karen, did I share what you had hoped I would share?
You did, but Brennan had a question about what is the Boggs Academy? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So Boggs Academy, as I named earlier, was a boarding school, a college preparatory boarding school that was gifted, the land was gifted by the Presbyterian Church in 1908. The school closed to students in 1984. And so at that time in 1984, Boggs Academy became a nonprofit, which is now called Boggs Rural Life Center. And so Boggs Rural Life Center has been the stewarding organization and institution of that land since 1985, and I believe it officially became a nonprofit in the early 90s. Did I answer your question, Mr. Brennan?
Yes, thank you.
Were there any other questions?
All right. Well, if no other questions for Ms. Alsie at this point, we're going to move on to our next presenter. And that next presenter is Brennan Washington. I'm sorry, I think that Joy was supposed to do this part, but Mr. Washington, would you introduce yourself, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. And right off the top, the folks in this group probably don't know, but I want to congratulate you into being accepted into the third cohort of our Sustainable Ag Leadership Program. And I'll explain a little bit more about their program, but I was really glad to see you get it. It was a really interesting project you proposed. And I just wanted to extend congratulations.
Thank you. Let me celebrate.
And I'll explain more about their program.
Congratulations, Karen.
So yeah, my name's Brennan Washington. Alsie, I'm sort of going to be freestyling here myself. I know Joy has been doggedly trying to get me down there to Augusta for some time now. We just couldn't make it work. So I'm really glad to be able to contribute here virtually today, and with the hope that at some point I can meet all of you in person. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York, which once I tell you about what I'm doing in ag, you wonder, how did this guy get involved in all of this stuff? But my wife and I my background was in information technology, and my wife Gwendolyn's background was in customer service, and which can both be pretty stressful jobs. So gardening was our method of relaxation. And when we got out of New York, we wanted to move out of New York, mainly because of taxes, and I was sick of the snow. You know, we eventually settled down in Lawrenceville, Georgia. So we moved down in 2004, and in 2005, we became farmers. We didn't intend to be farmers, but I always like to tell people I'm first and foremost a farmer. We own a small 2.5 acre, highly diversified farm in Lawrenceville. We do all types of produce, fruit, herbs. Up to a couple of months ago, we had laying hens as well, which we've had for quite a few years. But with the price of feed, we just couldn't justify it as a business expense. So most of those ladies, after some years of service to us, are now residing comfortably in our freezer. So we did that. When we started our journey into agriculture and eventually into local food system work, when we started, we didn't know what we were doing. I'm just gonna be honest. My wife just said, look, your hobby needs to pay for itself. So she happened to be going through downtown Lawrenceville one day and saw these guys sitting around. There was 3 guys sitting around with card tables, and they had produce on it. So she stopped the car and found out what they were doing. That was the Lawrenceville Farmers Market. And so we subsequently joined that market. And the following year, we were approached about running it, and we didn't know how to run a market, but we use a lot of our private sector experience to help inform us on what we should do to help grow that market. And so at the beginning, when we were grateful to have 10 vendors, you know, only 3 or 4 which actually sold farm-related products, and we would get 100 people come through the market on a Saturday morning. We were happy, but we eventually grew that market to, on a good Saturday, we had 40 to 50 vendors, and on a really good Saturday, we'd have 1,000 people come through. And because of that, we started being asked to help other municipalities start farmers markets. And so we had started out with the Norcross Farmers Market. Back then it was known as the Whistle Stop. And just people kept contacting us. And finally I said, you know what? I am not getting any of my regular work done. We need an association to handle this. And myself and a dynamic sister named Sadrina Jalal submitted a farmers market promotion program grant, and it got funded and to start the Georgia Farmers Market Association. Now that organization, unfortunately, after about 10 years, just closed its doors. And there's been talk about whether it should come back. It's really hard trying to put on a statewide organization, trying to start and manage and fund a statewide organization. But I really think there's room for an organization that caters specifically to farmers markets serving Black communities. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody who would like to take on that challenge of putting together an organization like that, that's for us, by us, so to speak. So that went well. And then in 2007 or 8, I wanted to know, we were always at the high end of our market. So we would seed sales to people who were selling tomatoes for $1 a pound or $2 a pound, and always tried to be at the upper end of that market. So we did a lot of heirloom tomatoes, we did a lot of heirloom peppers, products that would bring us a higher margin in the marketplace. And I want to know why we couldn't grow smaller melons like the European and Asian melons you see in some of the ethnic grocery stores. And everybody just saying, well, you just can't grow them in Georgia. You just can't grow. Why? You just can't. Why? You just can't. And then somebody told me about the SARE program. And I had never written a grant before in my life. I applied for what's known as the producer grant, which I'll explain in a minute. And I got $9,500 to do a 2-year trial of growing out those melons here in Georgia. And I always get asked, will they grow here? Yes, they will, but they can't take heavy Georgia heat. So you either have, what worked for us if we tucked them in around among our tree lines where they got filtered sunlight and they weren't taking the blast of the heat that Georgia can generate on any given day. So I was really impressed with the organization and eventually was asked, someone nominated me to sit on their administrative council, which is basically their board of directors. And I did. And I sat in that position for about 7 or 8 years. And most of the time I chaired the Minority and Limited Farmer Outreach Committee while on that. And then I'm currently the 1890 Land Grant Liaison and the Southeastern Outreach Coordinator for Southern SARE. And SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture and Research Education. And we're primarily a grants making organization. That's really what our reason for existing is to make grants to advance sustainable agriculture. And I do that work with a focus on 1890 universities, nonprofit organizations, and directly with farmers of color in 13 southeastern states, the US Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So as you can imagine, I travel an awful lot. That's one of the things. Sunday's a weird day for me because if I'm not on the road going somewhere, then I'm coming back. And so that was sort of the reason why it was hard for Joy and I to sort of hook up a personal meeting. But that consumes me and a lot of my work. And I wasn't going to take that job. We had a fire that destroyed our home back in August of 2015. And I was approached about taking this position. We were living in temporary housing, fighting with the county about trying to get our home rebuilt. And so I really didn't want to take on a new position. Little did I know, my wife was going around to a lot of people who work in agriculture and a lot of people with family, telling them to tell me to take the job because she felt that I would be really good at it and that I had a purpose to serve in this role. And thank God she did that because she was absolutely right. So yeah, I work primarily with, and when I took this job, my main goal was to make sure that the purposes of the Southern SARE program, that Black folk, principally Black folk, knew about it, that they were introduced to the program, to do whatever I can to help Black people access the funding that we have, and to make sure that they all had, at the very least, they had knowledge of it, because a lot of times, even with people who are Black, this information is not delivered to us. And if it is delivered to us, sometimes it's not the people feel they don't have the responsibility to assist people to really engage with this programming. And so I've been able to do some of that through my work. And I'm glad Alsie mentioned Habesha. Habesha is one of my big success stories. So we provide grants, everything from a producer grant that I told you about, I got from my melon project, which a producer can get up to, it's now up to $20,000 to do up to a 2-year program, some self-directed research on their own farm, all the way up to our research and education programs, which are our flagship grants, was $400,000, typically run by nonprofits or universities to do high-level research projects. And within that grant program, there's also $50,000 grants to do education, just straight up farmer education. And Habesha first applied for our conference sponsorship. So when we're not providing funding and through our competitive grant programs, we also fund. We don't like to send money back to DC. So when we get money back, we use it in a variety of manners. We provide travel scholarships. So David Kerr, who is the executive director of the Kerr Center in Oklahoma, he gets a pot of money just to do travel scholarships. So we will pay to send farmers, especially farmers of color, we will pay to send them to conferences, workshops, that type of thing. In fact, I was down in on Ricky Dollison's farm on Friday, and one of the things we talk about is getting some Black farmers up to this big elderberry conference they're having in Missouri this June. But we do that, and we pay travel, so either mileage or airline airfare. We pay for lodging. We pay for the actual registration fees if there is one for the particular event. Unfortunately, federal regulations say that it has to be a reimbursement type of program, which can be hard for a lot of Black farmers to actually come up with that. You know, you go to a conference, it could cost you $600-700 when everything's lumped together. That could be hard for minority underserved farmers to come up with. So I typically try to work with an organization that has the pockets to be able to pay that money up front, and then we'll just go ahead and reimburse them. So that's what I was doing down at Ricky's. The other pot of money comes to me, and that money is to fund educational events. So workshops, well, conferences was a big one. So we fund stuff like, for those of you who've been around a while, you heard of Southern SARE, which was our big regional sustainable ag conference. Unfortunately, it closed this year. The year before COVID really hit, they closed their doors. But we sent boatloads of farmers to that. Actually, Southern SARE was the driving force when that conference was just getting started and making sure that it survived. We worked closely with the 1890 universities, and we sent an awful lot of Black and brown farmers to that conference. We've sent folks to Georgia Organics. We just sent a bunch of folks to the Virginia Association of Biological Farming. So a lot of money goes to that. In April, they're going to have the Association of Research Directors symposium. It's going to be held in Atlanta. So we're big supporters of that because the 1890s are a critical constituency for us. But we also work with small organizations to help them they need $1,000 to put on a workshop around food safety or around growing a specific crop. You can just contact me and say, I got an idea for this workshop. It's not even a grant where you're in competition with anybody else. It is, as long as we have the money and your event meets our requirements of being focused on sustainable ag and everything else, we typically fund it. And I have yet in all the years I've been associated with SARE to see an event get turned down. So I'm really proud of that. One of the things that when I took this actual position and then moved off the SARE board, I'm really proud of the way that we have grown the scope of that project. Because usually it was just a few people in the know who knew we had this money. And now more and more people know it, and we're able to help more and more organizations and farmers put on these type of educational events. So that's my work with SARE. I also sit on an advisory committee for the Appalachian Regional Commission, which is looking at ways to improve life in Appalachia. And I'm not going to say I know everything about agriculture, so I was really surprised when they said that they want to reach Black farmers in Appalachia, because, you know, let's face it, when you think of Appalachia, you think of you think of white people, basically, but there's a lot of parts of Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama that runs through Appalachia. And so that was a surprise to me. I'm also sitting on an advisory committee for the Wallace Center, which is the organization that's done most of the yeoman's work around local food system infrastructure, starting out with a lot of training around food hubs, how to start them, how to maintain them, And now they're acting as an important party in getting people engaged with the agricultural marketing service, because they're about to dump a lot of money into infrastructure related work, through their grant programs, but they're also planning to stand up 7 technical centers throughout the United States. And, they had a national call. And one of the things that we said, one of those centers should be housed and run by an organization of color. And so that talk is still ongoing, but I'm sort of plugged into the conversations that they're having about that. And I also sit on the advisory board for the Southeastern Operations Center that was established a year ago by Rodale. And for those of you who don't know who Rodale is, it started out back, I think, in the 40s up in Pennsylvania, and they have been one of the primary organizations that have spread the concepts of organic or agriculture throughout the United States. And so they wanted to establish a technical training center down in the South, and they had a listening session, and they got an earful because sometimes these organizations, and a lot of times they're white-led organizations, come into a community and don't really understand the landscape of the area that they want to do work in. So we made that pretty clear to them. They want to do research around sustainable ag. Well, we have our land grant universities have been doing that type of research for years. And, one of my questions is, what are you going to be doing different? Or how are you going to engage people who haven't been involved in their research? And the one thing that we've been pushing them to do is really to hold a lot more educational events. For as quiet as it's kept, there's not really much in the way of direct farmer education. There are some programs, but there needs to be a lot more. And, especially around new things that come out like hemp. There weren't very many educational efforts directed at farmers of color. And from what I understand, some farmers of color got burnt trying to get into hemp without having that background and that knowledge. The other thing, and I just got contacted, I'm sure there's some tea drinkers on the phone, but Tazo Tea has engaged them to help spread the word about this mini grant program that they're going to be announcing. And basically, Tazo is going to be working with the Southeastern Operations Center to give out these mini grants that farmers can use for equipment. And they asked me to get involved. First thing I said, well, what's the restriction on the money? And so from what I understand, it's pretty much unrestricted funding. So if you want to apply for that grant to help you build a hoop house or to help you buy a walk-behind tractor, you can do that, unlike a lot of federal grant programs where you can't. So I'm helping to advise them on that. And so that's what my life is. And like I said, I'm sort of freestyling here. So my main thing and wanting to be engaged
we do
today.
have a question. We do have a question from Janelle.
Okay.
Go ahead, Janelle.
Oh, gratitude. I was just kind of waiting. I was seeing, how can we get in contact with you? My husband and I have a farm in Blythe, Georgia, where we are interested in training and educating our people. So I just heard a lot of different things that were being offered in doing the research education, and then just the farmer education. We have event space where we have the ability to host the events for some workshops here in the South Augusta region as well. It's just so many different things, just questions. So I see you put down in the chat how to get in contact with you. So definitely needed that information.
Yeah. And I'm probably, now that things are opening up, dare I say that we might be moving past this whole COVID nonsense, but I will work with Joy and Karen to maybe come down and do a tour of folks with the area and actually meet with you all in person. But we don't have to wait till then to get some work done. So I am going to put, I always say start with little money. So look at our sponsorship programs, which are not grant programs. It's a 2-page form. And I'm going to put that in the chat. It's a 2-page form. You tell us what your event's going to be. You tell us how much funding you need. You tell us how it's going to advance sustainable agriculture. And like I said, 95% of the time we go ahead and fund those requests. It is an excellent tool for us, especially for farmers of color, to help us get money out the door to help support efforts like this, to help support efforts like what you and your husband are trying to do down there, Janelle. So I put the link to the sponsorships for that, and I wish people would take more advantage of it. Definitely call me or contact me if you want to apply. Just don't go and fill the application out, because I will walk you through how to complete it to make sure that it doesn't get kicked back. And our education grant program is opening up again, probably in about 3 weeks. And that's a grant where you can get up to $50,000 to put on a 1-year training program. So I'm still waiting for SAAFON to apply for it. So I know I got Alsie on the phone. So hopefully we'll see something from them soon. So, but that's mainly open to nonprofits and universities. So if there are nonprofits down there in the Augusta area, once again, give me a call. And you know, Habesha, first they use our conference sponsorships to put on some events. We help fund their the big event they have in Atlanta. We help underwrite that a couple of times. Then they applied for some sponsorship money. Then our education grant program is not, I think we're only in our 4th or 5th year. Habesha applied the first year and they got a grant. I think their grant was around $38,000. They applied again the next year. And to be honest, I really didn't think they were going to get it, because we try to make sure that we distribute our money equitably. So meaning that if you've gotten a grant in the past, it's not to say that you're going to be excluded because of that, but we're going to look to try and fund organizations that haven't gotten our money as long as their grant is competitive. Well, Habesha applied and they got a grant the second year, which I was really sad. And then they used that grant, I was talking to them, and applied for a beginning farmer, rancher, and development grant, which is the USDA's flagship program for training new and beginning farmers. And I think it was last year, I'm all mixed up with time, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. They got a $250,000 or $300,000 grant to continue the urban ag training programs that, you know, Alsie have been a part of and we've been a part of there. So that's the thing I like to do, is to work with organizations who really have an interest in doing that, and really helping them get, first of all, the street cred. So, you know, it's always nice to say you got a sponsorship from Southern SARE to put on a elderberry workshop, and then be able to cite that in a larger grant application, because unfortunately that's what the reviewers look for sometimes. So I'm here to talk to if you have any ideas, and that goes for anybody else who's on this call today.
Gratitude.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I know that Thaddeus wanted to say something really quickly. If you're good with that, that is cool. Okay, got it.
Oh, hey guys, I'm Thaddeus Wynn. I'm from the CSRA. I grew up in Graniteville, South Carolina. My grandparents and everyone are from Edgefield, South Carolina. So up until recently, I worked in Augusta, Georgia. Worked there as a real estate appraiser for the county. Grandfather was a sharecropper, so I took things that he told me, and I'm now currently in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I have now begun building a mini farm in the backyard. And so we took some of the things that we've learned from my grandparents and everyone and just sort of started that in an urban setting. So it's a different kind of challenge, but I thank you guys. And Karen, thank you for inviting me. I didn't know this existed. So, but yeah, so that's what we're doing. And yes, sir.
Thaddeus, can you explain what I think it's a CRSA? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. CSRA, it's the Central Savannah River area. That's Augusta, Aiken. That's that little area right there around Savannah River area, the metro area. And I think that's where the majority of us are on here are from. But yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Just so you know, we have really started some engaging with the Gullah Geechee community in and around St. Helena in that area. And actually we have sponsoring the South Carolina Black Farmers Conference, which I think is happening in a couple of weeks in March. So to the extent, I don't know, I'm gonna have to go look at a map. I don't know how close you are to say St. Helena. I know Spartanburg, you're a couple hours to the west, right? Yeah, but to the extent I can make these events known to you and everyone else on the call today, so you can start to build collaborations with these folks. I know we are working closely with, a lot of y'all may know Lorana Hughes in Augusta. We are trying to do some work to get her up to Virginia State to look at some meat processing opportunities. So we're trying to get a couple of farmers up there to look at what they're doing. And I'm starting to stare down the barrel of retirement. I'm 63 years old, so I'm trying to see what I'm going to turn my attention to where I can have an impact. And for me, that's going to be in the area of supply chains. You can be the best Black farmer in the world, but at the end of the day, if you're taking your produce to a white packing house to be processed and then sold to supermarkets, or if you're taking your beef to a sale barn to be sold to a larger produce person, that's still, to me, I still consider that an extractive enterprise. That money is not staying in our community. And I can't talk about it too much, but I'm working on a grant proposal now that'll set up a supply chain training institute for Black farmers and ranchers. And so that's the type of stuff we're trying to help Lorana with. We've worked some with the Milestone Cooperative in Mississippi. And if anyone down there, and supply chain components can consist of food hubs, it can consist of certified kitchens. So I'm excited to see you guys bringing on a farmers market, but for those farmers who want to do certain types of value-added products, you have to be in a certified kitchen. Georgia has a pretty good cottage food law, but there's still some stuff, if you wanted to make tomato sauce, for example, you can't do that in your home kitchen. You have to do it in a certified kitchen. Helping folks to plan out and design and fund those type of projects is going to be a particular focus of mine over the next few years. So that's what I do, y'all. I mean, I don't know what else Karen and Joy want me to have, if anybody else. Yes, I can answer that question, Karen. And I think that's a good question you're asking. So
let me ask the,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Your inbox. So I wanted to, so because I'm new to all of this. I'm grateful for the space, but whenever I'm talking to folks about like get your farm track number, get registered with FSA, USDA, and apply for these loans or these programs, these grant programs. For people who are new like me, I just showed up like yesterday. But whenever I talk to established farmers, I get a lot of, not resistance, because what I get is like, I'm like, hey, do this thing, apply for this thing, get this, whatever. And they're saying, well, no, I don't necessarily want to do that. And so I've got like a lot of questions about it. Like, a question's like, why? I know why. I know why Black people distrust the government. I know why Black farmers distrust the USDA. And I have like a hell of a lot of questions for you, Brennan, that I'll ask you offline. But like but the question I can ask you today is, if we apply for grants and programs and cooperative agreements, does that mean that we're complicit? If I get money from like okay, and we'll talk about this the Southern SARE grant, this sponsorship, this leadership thing, am I complicit when I accept money from the government? Does that mean that I can't go back to the government and say, hey, y'all about some BS, it's crazy? Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does, Karen. That's a really good question. And if I had the time, I just want to give a really, really quick history, and then expand that out to different programs that are out there. So USDA has an atrocious history of treating Black farmers very poorly, especially in its farm service agency program. So those are the loans that a lot of farmers would need to take out to either buy farms or to operating loans to help them purchase the seed, fertilizer, and stuff to help them, run their farm. USDA has an atrocious history. They admit it. There's even no question whether or not that history exists. It's definitely there. And so I get hit with this question. There's a lot of distrust out there. The one thing that helps me with the SARE program is, although we get the USDA, we get our monies from NIFA, which is an agency to USDA. We are not a USDA agency, per quote. Our money is given to the 4 regions, Southeast, Northeast, North Central, which is the Midwest and the West. And that money is deposited and granted to a land grant university within that region to handle it. So in our case, that's the University of Georgia in cooperation with Fort Valley State and the Kerr Center that I mentioned earlier. My take on this is that Black people pay taxes, and we need to be able to get the benefits of the taxes that we pay while also reserving our rights, saying that you ain't doing right by us and you need to clean up your act. And I'll give you 2 examples that I'm sure some of y'all have seen the articles about this group of people who brought 500 or 600 acres. And I don't know exactly where it is in Georgia. I know Wayne Swanson is one of the people, but they're doing it to try and create a community and also to build some agricultural enterprises out of it. Well, they invited NRCS there week before last, and the lady was as condescending as she wanted to be. Meanwhile, she's talking to a group of people who are doctors, lawyers, clinical psychologists, and she was talking down to these people. So they're filing a complaint. But I say, don't be ashamed of applying for these programs and then calling it out, because if we don't call it out, nothing's ever going to get changed. The other thing I would like to point out is make sure we understand as a people what these different programs, whenever somebody hears grants, they think of USDA, they think of NRCS, and they think FSA, which you need a farm and tract number in order to take advantage of, say, the EQIP program, which is what funds your high tunnels, and if you're raising livestock, which helps you out with fences and watering facilities and that type of stuff. There you need a farm and tract number, and there has been the problem for Black folks for decades, is that those programs are administered on a county-wide level. So you get into some of these really racist counties, and they just ain't giving Black folks nothing. They've also, somebody else. I know Alsie mentioned urban ag, but I think Thaddeus mentioned he's doing some urban ag too. USDA, after years of some of us like Rashid and Bobby Wilson and myself saying, you know, urban ag is a legitimate form of agricultural production and needs to be supported. You know, even Southern SARE and its grant programs as recent as 8 or 9 years ago say we don't fund urban ag. And then some of us say because it's in the regulation. Well, some of us actually went and looked at the regulations. Not only did it not mention urban ag, it didn't mention agriculture. And so now we see this whole interest now in urban agriculture, but USDA has gotten some money to help fund urban agriculture projects. I was really nervous about them situating that program within NRCS. And recently they called me right before Christmas, asked me if I wanted to be put on the ballot for the Urban Ag Committee. I said, yeah, and it was myself, Bobby Wilson, I think Lovey Gilliam out of Atlanta was there, Jerome Brown, who used to be my NRCS agent. We were all on the ballot, and I didn't hear any more about it. And then I found out that I won. But the center that they set up the Urban Ag Committee in Barnesville, which is nowhere near me. I think I'm a good 2 hours, hour and a half drive from Barnesville. So it didn't make sense to me until we had our first meeting. Apparently they only set up, they just named a national committee and they only have 2 producers on it. It's Bobby Wilson out of Metro Atlanta Urban Farm. So if you don't know Barbie and you're involved in urban ag, get to know him. There was somebody else, I think from the Midwest, the Detroit area or something like that. But only 2 producers on a committee of 10 or 11 folks. But the big thing that surprised me is that they only set up 11 local committees around, because I'm thinking if you're setting up an urban ag, it's going to be in Fulton County, it's going to be attached, it's going to be in Fulton County or somewhere where there's a big urban center, but it's down in Barnesville. And I'm the only person on the committee. So for that committee, from our first committee meeting, I had to sit there and listen to a bunch of white farmers sign off on commodity payments to white farmers. That's what our first meeting was. And so going back to your question, Karen, I could have said, I'm not going to be involved in this, but I'm going to sit my butt right there because at some point, USDA will be releasing some money for urban ag grants. They already have, and it went to, and at Georgia, it went to a farm, and Alsie's on the phone. You ever heard of Evergreen Farms, Alsie? It went to this farm that nobody heard of. They got $300,000. Nobody in the urban ag movement in Atlanta, which is pretty progressive, and where everybody knows, nobody heard of these people. So I would say, no, don't let what USDA has done in the past keep you from applying for, quite frankly, what you are entitled to and that other people are entitled to. And where we have an advantage here in Georgia as it concerns like NRCS and FSA, our state, the top guy in NRCS in the state is a brother. And he's been pretty approachable. You know, his name is Terrence Rudolph. You definitely want to try and go up the chain of command. It's a problem, but don't hesitate for a minute to go to the top guy. And if necessary, there's a young lady in Alabama named Rhonda Benton, who her NRCS office was doing all the stuff that you've probably heard farmers tell you. They kept losing her application, or she would file in time and she never got any funding. She sued them. And she won. And they replaced that white, the conservationists in that office, as well as the state conservationists. They lost their jobs behind that. So I would say, yeah, that history is there. And I'm going to be honest with you, just because a black face shows up on your farm doesn't mean you're going to get a fair shake, because there are some of us who take these positions and don't do so with the foundational belief that you're there to help Black people, you know, and unfortunately that's out there, but you know, you'll know pretty quickly whether the person that you talk to is going to be an ally or foe. And a lot of that, it comes down to education, knowing before you even go into that office what that agency is supposed to do for you. So, so I would say definitely we want folks. And let me go to farm and track number. Farm and track number is only important when you're applying for either FSA program, NRCS. And I'm giving a grants workshop, federal grants workshop on, what date am I going?
It's the second, right?
Yeah, March 2nd. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. A lot of federal money, you don't need a farm and track number. You don't need to own. So one example, because you guys are starting the farmers market, is the farmers market promotion program. What is that grant program is about? It is designed to fund any marketing channel that is dedicated to direct farmer to consumer sales. So any sales transaction where that dollar from the consumer is going directly to that farmer with no middleman. So that's farmers markets, that's multi-farm CSAs. In some cases, it's roadside stands, anywhere where that sale, that dollar's passing from the consumer directly to the farmer. That opens up again. Actually, just announced that they're going to provide $92 million this year, but I haven't seen the RFA on it yet. So I'm going to keep checking throughout this week to see when they release the RFA. Y'all should be applying for that money. What does it cover? It covers marketing expenses. It covers labor. You know, a lot of folks at farmers markets are volunteers. But I found out the hard way that once your market gets a certain size, you want a paid market manager. You want some paid staff there. Helps you pay for staff. Helps you pay for supplies. So you want to brand your market. What's the name of your market? I don't have the. What's the name of the market that y'all doing down there?
It's Golden Camp.
All right, so you're gonna want your little bags, your little tote bags and that type of stuff. You're gonna want that to help you brand the market. You're gonna need money for advertising. That's what the Farmers Market Promotion Program is for. And I think it's up to $100,000. If you've never applied for it, and I tell it, and I'm gonna cover this in the grant, just because it's $100,000, you don't have to apply for $100,000. You may make well with $30,000 or $35,000 or $40,000 to get your project off the ground. So, but you don't need a farm and track number to do that. You don't need a, you don't need to be registered with FSA. There are some things you have to do, like register with grants.gov and stuff in order to do the actual application process. But you don't need that. And one of the things I'm trying to sound alarm, we don't know, a lot of times we don't even know about this money. So there's FMPP, which is direct to consumer sales. There's LFPP, which is a local food promotion program, which is all infrastructure related stuff. So if you want to do a food, let's say your market and your farmers have gotten to the point where you want to start selling to your local school system, you can get money for that. You can get up to $100,000, do a planning study, and you can come back and get up to $500,000 to help you implement that project. There is the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Grant Program, which is the USDA's flagship program for training new and beginning farm. You can get an organization or nonprofit could get up to $200,000 a year, or from what I understand now, it's $250,000. They move it back to the original funding limits. $750,000 for up to a 3-year program to do farmer-related training. Once again, you don't have to ask for that much money. That doesn't require a farm and track number. Now, where you run into difficulty is there's not enough of us who sit on these review panels. You don't have to have a PhD to say, I want to be a reviewer who reviews these grants that comes in. In fact, I would encourage anybody who really wants to know about how to write these grants and what makes a good grant and what happens is to become a reviewer. And usually they're looking for subject matter experience. And what does that mean? You're running a farmer's market. You're a farmer, you're a rancher. You're involved in your local food system in one way or another. As long as you have that experience and you're reading a application that has to do with establishing a farmers market in South Dakota. That's all you need. You don't need a bunch of letters behind your name. And I have sat on too many grant panels where we weren't in the room in the numbers that we needed to be. And why is that important? You know, people always say, well, you know, I just don't have time to get involved. There was a, I think this is one of our programs. We funded the bulk of small ruminant research in the United States, primarily through the 1890 University. So if you raise goats or sheep, we've done through our 1890 partners the bulk of that research. And we got another application from what, and I wasn't in the room for this particular one, but a white person said, well, why are we funding goats and sheep anyway? Nobody eats that stuff. Luckily, there were some people in the room who knew about the influx of people from Africa into the Southeast, who knew about the dietary habits of our Hispanic brothers, and knew that, you know, you coming from a whole different space, that is a big commodity among communities of color. And that grant ended up getting funded. But had there not been people of color in that room, that grant wouldn't have gotten funded. So so that's our challenge with some of these grants where you don't have to deal with farm and track numbers and stuff like that. Our biggest challenge is making sure we have people in the rooms when review time comes that look like us. So. I know that was a long answer to your question, but hopefully it illuminated something for you.
But it was a great answer, and it enlightened us some more to let us know that we just need to go out. We have to try. We have to put in our effort to be funded as well. Yes,
yes, yes. And I would say start with our program. And if you apply for one of my programs, for God's sake, please let me know. You know, I went down to Ricky. When I was with Ricky, I had no idea that he had applied for one of our R&Es, research and education grants last year, because I didn't know. And what I think happened, he applied with, someone asked the question, do you need to be a 501c3? For a lot of the programs you do, or you need to be a state chartered nonprofit. You know, there's a difference. You don't necessarily need to jump through the hoops to become a 501c3. You can charter as a Georgia certified nonprofit organization, which probably be a little bit cheaper. But a lot of them you have to. But he was working with a nonprofit that I didn't know about, and so when I'm looking at the list, excuse me, the list of people that I know so that I can do whatever I can to help push them over the finish line. I didn't know who they were, and I didn't realize it was attached to Ricky and these Black farmers down there. So, so yeah. And somebody says, when you go into these offices, document your experiences. That's true. And if you apply for these grants and you do not get funded for whatever reason, don't let that be the end of it. Don't be discouraged. You know, all of you learn how to ride a bike, and you probably fell dozens of times when you're trying to learn that skill, but you got back up and got on the bike, and now you know how to ride a bike. Don't let applying for these grants disillusion you if you don't get funded the first, second, or even third time, because it's like anything else. You're building your grant writing muscles. And you know, you can work with people like me and other folks who really see the importance of this, who will help guide you. We can't write the grants for you, but we can certainly look at your drafts. We can listen to your idea and let you know if it fits the program that you're trying to apply for, and all that other good stuff. Now, Menia is giving us the red light here.
I want to say really
Can I
quick
say something real quick here?
before Menia
I'm-
cuts things off. I want to ask Nakia to share a little bit. And I know we got I know that Jeff is in this space too, but Nakia is in Mississippi by way of the great city of Augusta, Georgia. So would you share a little bit, Nakia?
Well, greetings to everybody. It's good to see everybody here. I don't know where to necessarily start. I guess I could start with just, it's good to see everyone that I'm familiar with. I see you, Karen. I see Alsie. Who else is on here? Sarah and others. It's good to see my old Augusta family and Georgia family there doing things. I know prior to me leaving, well, anybody that know my personal journey, I lived in Augusta, Georgia for quite some time, and then we got in. My wife and I ended up getting into agriculture, or I ended up getting back into agriculture by way of Habesha, a workshop at Habesha in the Harrisburg area. Plus also our relationships with Mama and Baba Sam Adderson and the Browns and other organic farmers in that area. SAAFON and Boggs and all those relationships. So you all know Tiana, some of you know Tiana and Starlit Farms down there in Augusta, Georgia, as well as Addison Fresh Produce and others, where that came out of our work that we did with trying to not only establish more organic growers in the area, but also put tracks down to establish some semblance of a food system in Augusta, Georgia, especially in areas like Harrisburg and East Augusta, where there's a dire need for food security or food sovereignty in those areas. There's a clear-cut example of food apartheid in those areas, as well as Keysville, South Augusta, where Karen is doing her work in other places. So from that, because of those relationships, I am now in Mississippi working with SIPculture Community Farm and SIPculture, which is the Mississippi Center for Cultural Production, who was trying to do the same work in Utica, Mississippi around art and food that we see in Augusta, Georgia and other places. So we started last year in April, building out a 17-acre farm. Thank you, Alsie. In the heart of Utica. If you know about farming, you know that starting in April is like starting to break ground. And actually, I mean, in April is probably insane for a farmer, especially if you're trying to produce for that late spring, summer, and going into the fall, you know. So we hit the ground running. We had 4 apprentices that we were working with. We broke ground in April, establishing our permanent raised bed no-till system. So since then, we've been building out infrastructure. We were able to feed through a CSA that we call ElderShare, the older Utica community 60 and up, providing them with 5 to 7 pounds of fresh produce that was subsidized through funding, through funds we raised, and but given free to them. So it was a sponsored CSA that we're still carrying on into this growing season. And so since then we've built out a lot of infrastructure. The challenges that we've had and I'm giving it very cut and dry, but some of the challenges that we have had in building out this local food system and this farm and this training and education platform is, you know, the lack of resources locally. The supply chain, you know, we've had to extend it all the way out to Virginia and other places to get drip tape and amendments and, you know, all the things that we need in order to function. What we see is with very little overhead. So we use a lot of hand tools. We use broad forks, shovels, rakes, things of that nature. We don't really use a tractor. because we're trying to teach that you don't need all that to start farming. However, those things aren't like readily available to you in rural towns like Utica, Mississippi, which is only a population of maybe 800 people, which is, and it's right outside of Jackson, but it's still, you run into these issues. And speaking to what Brother Brennan was just talking about, we did apply for NRCS and USDA some funding. They came out and then they told us that we were not eligible because we weren't farming the full 17 acres. So then we expanded and we still applied for funding. And then they came back and said, well, your the person that is your representative, excuse me, or the agent that worked for NRCS that covers your area is now gone. So now we're giving you a new agent, and that agent, well, you have a new agent and your application has been put down on the list. So we understood that there's a relationship that could be had between SIP Culture Community Farm and local NRCS. However, we're not solely reliant on that. We're planning to do some work with the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives and Brother Baba Ben Burkett, which is connected to the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and other organizations. So a lot of the work we've done has been outside of our relationship with USDA. So I'm saying all that to say that you can farm without a relationship with USDA, even though, and I do feel that sometimes USDA and NRCS or those, it becomes a little bit of a burden, or a little bit, you kind of get caught up in the weeds of it all when you're talking about all these resources that are available to farmers, beginning farmers, because it's like no one can actually maneuver you through that. And I think Brother Brennan is one that can do that. So I appreciate him in that. But it's very difficult, not only in Georgia, but throughout the South, to have people address the needs of farmers or producers, growers, stakeholders, and I hate that term, but I had to say stakeholders, on the ground level, if I'm making any sense. The needs of us in the South are not fully understood, and therefore a lot of the resources that are available don't, how should I say it? Just simply don't apply, to us, if I'm making any sense. So what I would think is that, in my experience, I think that the establishment of local food systems throughout the South and connecting those to each other will allow us to be better served through cooperatives, through just networks, through, if you're buying fertilizer by the ton and some other farmers that need it, seeds, whatever the establishment of seed banks, the establishment of tool banks, all these things are necessary. Cooperative owned grocery stores, people-led restaurants that will probably provide food and resources, or provide food for those in the communities that are underserved on a sliding scale. I think all of those things are important. And yeah, I'll shut up now. So.
Yeah, well, I know Menia said we're close to the end of the call, probably past the end of the call, but I really want to thank you, Nakia, for sharing what you did, because it really underscores the point that One, we can't depend on the USDA. We need to go there and claim what's ours, but we can't depend on them. But it also gives me the opportunity to really stress how much building networking around with like-minded Black people is so important. So, you know, in Mississippi, I don't know where Utica is, but you know, you've got Cindy Ayers in Jackson, you've got Otis Wright in Jackson that's doing a lot of good food system work. You got Mileston, you got Calvin Head with Mileston, and you've got the dean of them all, Frank Taylor. And the more, you know, they may not be able to help you to the level that they want you to help you, but Cindy will tell you, if you just recounted the story, what NRCS told you to Cindy, she would say they're full of it. And you now have an example where you can go to them and say, wait a minute, you don't funded Cindy for about 7 or 8 high tunnels right now, and she ain't farming on her land. You know, we've gotten tons of NRCS thing, and my farm's only 2.5 acres. We ain't no big folk. We ain't there. But the more that you're exposed to when you build networks with folks who are doing like-minded work, you'll see that the lies will float to the top, like something else I'm not going to mention on the call, but it'll float to the top. And I would encourage you. And I'm going to leave the call with this: Southern SARE is perfectly willing to help facilitate those gatherings and that networking. So if it's a matter of you guys just want to, SAAFON, for example, would be the perfect organization to do it. You just want to have a gathering of Black growers in Mississippi to say, just get together and kick it about the issues and what's going on, just specific to the state of Mississippi. We'd be more than happy to try and help fund an effort like that.
Okay, so Brennan, so let's talk, because what I do want to do is either a conference or symposium here in Utica or in Jackson. So definitely let's exchange information, because that is something that I want to, that's in my to-do list to plan out.
Yeah, and I put my contact information in the chat, but I hope Menia and Karen will share it out. You know, that's my actual cell phone number. The best thing to do is to send me either a text or an email, and I'll get back to you probably to set up, you know, a time where we could have a really extensive call. But just tell me what you want to do and that type of stuff. So.
Okay, and I will end what I have to say. What I always say is the most revolutionary thing you can do is put a seed in the ground, right? Because that is an act of selfless love for those, because you know with that seed growing, you're trying to ensure the well-being of the community in which you live, and even in some communities in which you don't live, but you know they have basic needs, which is food, clothing, and shelter. So. And you can't get none of those without agriculture. So with that, I would say continue to fight, continue to push to organize yourselves and push for food sovereignty, and you know continue to push for your traditional food ways to be most important in these conversations around food. I have a friend here that's a brother that's a rapper. And he was like, man, I've learned so much about food and how it, you know, how policy, how politics, how all this stuff affects food and how food affects it, or agriculture affects all these things from you than I didn't even know some of these things were affected by the agricultural system. So, and, you know, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I know that this is a system that is not geared for us. And we, you know, there are those who want to dismantle the current food system because it is corrupt, or the agricultural system, commercial agricultural system, because it is corrupt, it is racist, it is the nucleus of why we're even here having a conversation in English as African people. However, you know, it is like Brother Brennan was saying, USDA and NRCS, even though they have a history of racism, we still know that that is a tool, just like voting is a tool, just like any of these things that are tools that we need in order to further ourselves along. So we can't just throw it away in our wanting to dismantle it, right? Or destroy this thing out. But at the same time, we know that it's just a quiver in our, you know, one of our arrows that we will use when we need to use it. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Nakia. Brennan, would you please, thanks for everyone who was here and shared information and shared your heart and your space and all of that. Alsie, if you have anything else to add, do you have anything to share with us in closing?
No, just grateful to share space with you all. Really grateful to hear Brennan and Nakia share wisdom. Yeah, I'm really excited to figure out the connectivity around the relationships and resources around the CSRA. And so, yeah, it won't be my last time engaging with y'all. So I just appreciate you and hope everyone has a good Sunday.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Brennan, I see you did share the time and a date for the workshop that you're going to be presenting. We want to be able to make sure that we can show up for that. And I'll share it. We'll share it in our channels as well. So do you have any final, any final words to share with us?
I just want to once again express my gratitude for y'all in inviting me into your space to talk about this stuff. You know, that makes my job, you know, I'm one guy and I carry such a big territory, and the work that y'all are doing down there in Augusta by you reaching out to me and inviting me into this space means a lot. And I really appreciate, especially with Joy, because Joy was trying to nail me down for a while and we just couldn't work out. And I will say, and I would want to leave with this, I do a lot of these type of talks and I mentioned, you know, I'm accessible, and I'm going to be honest with you, maybe 10% of the people will actually take me up on my offer to help or to be engaged, whatever they want to do, which sometimes kind of disappointing. But I just want to reiterate, you know, that if you have something going on, that if you need assistance, that at least that I can provide to you, please take advantage of it, because that's what you're going back to something that Karen said. That's what your tax dollars pay for. You know, you pay for my salary, you pay for the materials that we developed. You know, people always ask me when I'm doing the display, are these materials for sale? No, they've already been paid for, and your taxes have paid for this. So take advantage of it. I'm always here to answer questions, and I really appreciate what you guys are trying to do down there in Augusta. You know, it can be disheartening sometimes trying to get something, but there's a lot of jubilation and really seeing Black people such as yourselves trying to advance this type of work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm glad that you were able to join us via Zoom. I can't wait for you to come into Augusta, Georgia, and we can see each other face to face. We'll have to plan that soon.
Yes.
And I thank you. Menia has her hand up, and so I'll turn it back over to Menia. You just had your hand up.
Yes. Before we go, I wanted to mention that I am hosting a plant and soil class with Dr. Alex Boggs from FAMU, Florida A&M University, my alma mater, the best school ever. He is the Extension Research Farm Director there. He is the Extension Research Farm Director there. And I just think it's a free training, and at the end you get a certificate saying that you have attended this training. So it's 5 days. It's going to be March 14th, and I'm going to put the information in the chat. You do have to register for it. And then the next training, you mentioned high tunnels, the next training in April, it will also be a free training, will be strawberries and low cost high tunnels. So it's important for me to make sure that our farmers across the United States or wherever they are get this information, especially if I can offer it for no cost. So thank you so much. And does anybody have anything else? This has been a robust and amazing meeting. So if you have any questions, concerns, please reach out to us. We are here. Does anybody else have anything to add?
I just want to once again just tell them
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
And Nakia, I hope that hopefully we can get you on schedule to talk to the group as well as a whole and present to us to let us know a little bit more about what you're doing. We just thank you all. Once again, our next meeting will be on March the 20th. It will be a field day and more information will come forth that. Remember, please save the date of April the 20th for our Golden Camp Market, 4 to 7. We're excited about that. Thank you all for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.